Hey everyone, welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something that I think is on a lot of people's minds these days,
Yeah.
and that is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
So we have some excerpts here from a PDF titled Bitcoin Book English.pdf,
Okay.
and we're going to kind of dive deep into this and see what it has to say.
Right.
So I don't know about you, but I'm always looking for ways to, make my money work harder. And this whole Bitcoin thing has really kind of caught my attention.
Yeah, for sure. It's a hot topic.
Yeah.
And I think this deep dive is really going to get to the heart of what Bitcoin is and what it could mean for somebody like you who's interested in saving and building wealth for the future.
Okay, so this PDF starts out with this analogy of a hamster wheel. And, that really hit home for me because it's like you're constantly working, you're earning money, but then you have to invest it just to kind of keep up with inflation.
Right. It's a feeling a lot of people can relate to. You're running and running, but financially, it feels like you're not really getting anywhere. And that kind of brings us to the core functions of money. It's supposed to facilitate trade act as a store of value,
Just basic.
provide a unit of account for pricing things, all that.
Right.
But then where it gets interesting is the source is arguing that throughout history, money has evolved from bartering to gold, then cash, and now to digital forms.
Yeah.
And, the most competitive form of money is the one that wins out.
Right.
So is Bitcoin the next step in this evolution?
Right, so that's the big question.
Yeah, that's the question.
The PDF really kind of zeroes in on this issue of scarcity,
Yeah.
especially with digital money. And the thing is that governments and banks, they can basically create as much digital money as they want.
Yeah.
And the source argues that, if you can create something infinitely, it eventually becomes worthless.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. Like if you could just create gold out of thin air,
It would be worthless, yeah.
right? And that's a scary thought because you work hard for your money. But if they keep printing more and more of it, it's like your hard work is losing value over time.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of inflation comes in. The PDF actually calls it time theft. Because if the money you earn today buys less and less tomorrow,
Wow.
it's like someone is stealing the value of your work over time.
I've never thought about inflation that way, but it makes a lot of sense. It's like our time is literally being stolen.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a powerful way to think about it.
Yeah, and the PDF even gives an example of this using housing costs. Apparently the cost of housing in USD keeps rising, but in Bitcoin it's actually been decreasing.
That's a pretty striking example, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the mysterious creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto.
Right.
The source doesn't reveal their identity,
Mm.
which just adds to the intrigue.
Right.
But it does tell us that Bitcoin was created during the 2008 financial crisis. Remember, that was a time of massive money printing and economic uncertainty. So Bitcoin kind of emerges as like a potential solution to this problem of unlimited money creation. It's kind of like a digital rebellion against the traditional financial system.
You could see it that way for sure. The source describes Bitcoin as a decentralized, encrypted financial database.
So it's not controlled by any government or bank?
Right. Imagine a network of computers all over the world
That's pretty wild.
working together to maintain a financial system without any central control. It's like the internet of money.
So how does it actually work? How is it secured?
That's where the concept of mining comes in. People use their computing power to solve complex mathematical puzzles, and in return, they get rewarded with Bitcoin. This process not only secures the network, but also gives Bitcoin its value
Okay.
because it requires real-world resources, like time and energy to produce.
So it's like a digital gold rush, but instead of shovels, we're using computers.
Exactly.
But hold on. If it takes so much effort to create Bitcoin, why is the price so volatile?
That's a great question, and that's something the PDF addresses directly.
Expert. So why is it that Bitcoin's price is all over the place?
Well, the source points to a couple of things. First, there's still a lot of speculation in the Bitcoin market. People are buying and selling based on hype in short-term price movements, which can lead to, big swings. And second, there's still a lack of widespread understanding of what Bitcoin really is and how it works. As more people learn about it and its potential, we might see less volatility over time.
Okay, so that kind of makes sense. But then there's these things called Bitcoin halving events.
Right.
What are those and why do people make such a big deal out of them?
So every 4 years, the rate at which new Bitcoins are created gets cut in half. And this is built into the code. It's designed to control inflation. So think about it. If the supply of new Bitcoin is cut in half, but demand continues to grow, basic economics tells us that the price is likely to increase. this built-in scarcity, is a core part of what makes Bitcoin attractive as a long-term investment.
So these halving events are like rocket fuel for Bitcoin's price.
Yeah, they've historically been followed by significant price surges,
Hmm.
which makes sense when you consider the supply and demand dynamics at play.
Okay.
Now, the PDF also mentions something called a power law model, which might sound intimidating, but it's basically a way to predict how something grows over time.
I'm listening. What does this power law model say about Bitcoin?
So in Bitcoin's case, this model suggests that its price could continue to rise exponentially as adoption increases.
Okay.
And the source has some pretty striking visuals comparing Bitcoin's current market cap to the total wealth in the world.
I'm looking at that now, and it's still such a tiny fraction of global wealth, but if it captures even a small percentage of that, the potential for growth is just mind-blowing.
It really is.
No wonder huge institutions like BlackRock are starting to invest in it.
That's right. The source mentions that BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, is holding billions in Bitcoin for their clients. Now, these guys don't make moves lightly, so this can be a signal that more and more institutional investors are getting on board.
Speaking of big institutions, what about governments? Can they just ban Bitcoin?
It's a common question, but the source argues that it's almost impossible to ban something as decentralized as Bitcoin. There's no central authority to shut down, like a bank or company.
Right, so it's like trying to ban the internet, it's just not going to work.
Right, exactly. Plus, governments are in constant competition with each other. It's unlikely they'd all agree on a ban,
No.
especially when some countries might see Bitcoin as a way to gain an economic advantage.
I see what you're saying, but I'm also thinking about all the people who have lost money on Bitcoin because of its volatility.
Yeah.
How does the source address that risk?
It acknowledges the risks, but it also emphasizes the importance of taking a long-term perspective. Bitcoin is still a relatively young technology, and like any new asset class, it's going to experience growing pains. The source argues that as the market matures and more people understand Bitcoin, those wild price swings should become less frequent.
Okay, so it's about being aware of the risks and potentially taking a longer-term approach. What about the environmental impact of Bitcoin? That's another concern I hear a lot about.
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern. But the PDF actually challenges the idea that Bitcoin is inherently bad for the environment. It explains that Bitcoin miners are incentivized to use the cheapest and most efficient sources of energy.
So they're looking for the cheapest way to power their computers, which could actually lead them to renewable energy sources.
Exactly. Many miners are already using hydro, solar wind, even geothermal energy. The source argues that Bitcoin mining could actually drive innovation in the renewable energy sector.
That's interesting. That's not something I had considered before. So let's take this a step further. The PDF paints this picture of a future where Bitcoin is widely accepted as a medium of exchange just like cash. Is that even realistic?
It might sound far-fetched, but consider this. We already use digital payment systems all the time.
Yeah.
Bitcoin could simply become another option in our digital wallets. The source even uses the example of a supermarket with prices listed in Satoshis.
Satoshi is the smallest unit of a Bitcoin, kind of like a penny to the dollar.
This might sound a little strange at first, but if Bitcoin becomes more stable and widely accepted, it's not that crazy to imagine.
Yeah,
But what does all of this mean for someone like me, who's just trying to figure out how to save and invest for the future? So we've covered a lot of ground here, but the big question is, what does all this mean for someone like me who's just trying to figure out how to save and invest for the future?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The PDF frames Bitcoin as a potential tool for saving and building wealth for the future. It's like a digital gold rush, but instead of digging in the dirt, we're securing our financial future with technology.
Okay, that's a pretty compelling image, but it's not just about throwing all your money into Bitcoin, right?
Absolutely. The source stresses the importance of continued learning and understanding. It encourages everyone to do their own research and make informed decisions based on their own individual risk tolerance.
So it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's more about educating yourself and figuring out if Bitcoin fits into your overall financial plan. Exactly. Remember, this is just one perspective based on the information in this PDF. There are other viewpoints out there, and it's important to consider those as well.
Right. Critical thinking is key, especially when it comes to something as revolutionary as Bitcoin.
Absolutely. Now, I want to leave you with something to ponder. The PDF talks about how Bitcoin could change the way we think about saving and wealth. So here's a question for you. What if the concept of retirement changes entirely in a world where sound money, like Bitcoin, is widely adopted?
Wow, that's a big one. It really makes you think about the long-term implications of this technology and how it could reshape our relationship with money, work, and even time itself.
It's certainly a fascinating concept to explore, and who knows, maybe this deep dive has sparked your curiosity to learn even more about Bitcoin and its potential.
It definitely has for me. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bitcoin. We hope you found it informative and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and as always, dive deep.